me straighten this up. I feel like my frame is a little crooked, but we're going to roll with it. Hello, welcome to my YouTube channel. As my hair pokes me in the face, my name is Lorna, and on this channel, we predominantly do single book reviews. So this video, Lorna Doone by my guy, R.D. Blackmore. Let's discuss. I feel like this is one of those Victorian classics that I don't see read a whole lot. And you know what? We need to bring this book back, you know? Time for people to now associate Lorna Doone not with shortbread cookies, but my guy, R.D. Blackmore. Because this book was a trip with no luggage, and I mean that in the best way. But none may gauge a woman's power when her love and faith are moved. So in Lorna Doone by Blackmore, we have a Victorian classic that is set in the 1600s. Our main character, who's also narrating the book, is John Ridd, and his older self is recounting events of his childhood and younger adult life. So it goes from his childhood to him being in his 20s. And he is a yeoman in rural England. But this land is also close to the dunes. It's a clan of violent men that plunder and harass the others and the good folks in the area. So when John was a young boy, his father was murdered by the dunes. But as fate would have it, John Ridd also meets the young Lorna Doone. This is after his father has passed. John Ridd's probably between the ages of 10 and 13. And he meets the young Lorna Doone and immediately falls in love with her. But years pass after their first meeting, and then they do meet again as young adults. And they decide to pursue a relationship despite the complications that arrive given Lorna's familial background. So Lorna Doone is a romantic novel in multiple ways. It's clear that Blackmore is romanticizing the past, but I'll get into that a little bit more later. And there are also these idealized or romanticized portrayals of how men and women should be. And yes, it's outdated. Like, you read this and you're like, my guy, no. But again, we have to put books within the context in which they're being published and written. But somehow it's also charming. Like, is chivalry really dead though? Because why chivalry had to die like that? What if I want somebody to open the door for me? Does chivalry have to be dead? Does it? Does it? Does it? Okay. Because I think it's charming. In this book, there's something about it that John, you're a little wrong, but it's charming. John has his own notions in particular of how women should be. He has two sisters, and his younger sister, Eliza, in particular. We'll get into Eliza. So, and even though, I'm all over the place, even though John Ridd, this book has its own notions of how women should be, you have to remember that John Ridd is narrating. He has his own ideas, but Blackmore, writing all of this, makes the female characters the best characters in this book. They are the funniest, they are the wittiest, they are the smartest. The women have a moment in this book. There is another young lady named Ruth. Man, Ruth, she is an OG. She's a real one. And the way that how Blackmore uses her character in the end, she's a savage, and I love it. So Eliza in particular, from John's perspective, she is what a woman should be. She is bookish, and she speaks her mind. She's a bit of a smart aleck. She has some of the funniest lines in this book, but John thinks that poor little Eliza is just a lost cause. But it was too late for Eliza. She was born next day with more mind than body. The worst thing that can befall a man. Like, how rude. Eliza is hilarious. She is contrasted against women like Lorna, who is so hyper feminine. She's soft and delicate, quiet, very domestic. Which, again, this is the 1600s, taking place in the 1600s, being written by a Victorian man. So John Ridd thinks that Lorna is just the epitome of femininity and Eliza's a lost cause. But in a way, this book reads all in good fun. John himself represents this idealized picture of manhood. He's big and strong and chivalrous, but he's modest. He is contrasted against men who are manipulative and violent and too political and vain. For being in the best clothes, one tries to look and to act so far as may be up to the quality of them, not only for the fear of soiling them, but that they enlarge a man's perception of his value. John is a very funny narrator. He's entertaining. He is dry and sarcastic, and sometimes you'll read it and you'll be like, my guy is joking. He's joking. It's really funny. And he's a bit sarcastic, and there's just this underlined humor that permeates his whole narration. Like, he doesn't take himself too seriously. The aforementioned criticism of vanity is contrasted with his own humility and self-deprecation. He's often feigning his own ignorance so that people will feed him information because they think he's too dense to get it. So he's playing dumb and therefore just banking information. Like, I almost quoted Lil Wayne. Should I do it? He moves in silence. I'm not gonna quote 6'7" today. But John Ridd moves in silence. Real G's move in silence like lasagna. Remember that? Anybody? Okay. No? Okay. It must not be supposed that I was altogether so thick-headed as Jeremy would have made me out. But it is my character that I like other people to think me slow and to labor hard to enlighten me, while all the time I can say to myself, this man is shallower than I am. It is pleasant to see his shoals come up, while he is sounding mine so. Savage. John Ridd is playing the game. He's playing the game. Again, there is a lot, like I said, talking about going back to romanticism. There's also a lot of romanticization of nature and living a simplified life. Despite this being a complicated political landscape, this is England in the 1600s. So there's some drama going on politically. And this isn't an overly political novel. Blackmore doesn't go into all of these politics, but he gives you just enough to know their political tensions, and especially when it comes to Catholicism and Protestantism and loyalty to the king versus should we be talking about the monarchy. And what does that mean? So he kind of just gives you a hint of that, and it's just not overly complicated, and he's not beating you over the head with it. But there is still a sense of nostalgia, despite the time period and the troubles that were very real in England during the 1600s. My guess is that Blackmore is writing this romanticized, nostalgic narrative about nature and living a seemingly more simple life out in the countryside, because this is Victorian England, in which he is a contemporary of. And in Victorian England, there is so much there are a lot of technological advances that are being brought forth. Trains and industry and the dirtiness and the grunginess of town life. And so I believe that Blackmore is paying homage to the simpler way of life, in which you're not living in a town and there's soot everywhere, and they didn't have proper ways of disposing of waste, etc. So that is my guess. Because there are these really gorgeous sections of this book that are just describing nature and the seasons as they're changing. And again, it's not done in a way that's tedious or dense or boring. They're just these beautiful descriptions. Although my heart was leaping high with the prospect of some adventure and the fear of meeting Lorna, I could not but be gladdened by the softness of the weather, and the welcome was of everything. There was that power all around, that power and that goodness which make us come, as it were, outside our bodily selves to share them. Over and beside us breathes the joy of hope and promise. Underfoot our troubles past. In the distance, bowering newness tempts us ever forward. We quicken with largesse of life and spring with vivid mystery. You also get descriptions of him farming and the relationship that John Ridd has with his animals. And it's just so good. It's so good and it's so well written. And it just never felt boring. For the length of this novel, my edition is over 700, or it might be about 700 and just under 730 pages for a thick one. It never felt too slow for me. There's always something going on. I will say that, so I did buddy read this with my friend Joanne on Instagram, and we read this back in June, and it did take us both about 40 to 50 pages to get the groove of the writing style, because there is some colloquial dialect from a couple of the characters. One in particular, you really have to slow down during those passages. But even if you don't get everything that character is saying, John Ridd is narrating around it, so you can still use context clues to figure out what this character just said. So there are some passages, depending on who's speaking, where you may have to slow yourself down. But once you get into the rhythm of the narrative overall, it's smooth sailing. And we both enjoyed this novel more than we thought we would. Really didn't know what to expect. Maybe I had the fear that it was going to be one of those dense Victorian novels that can feel tedious at times. As much as I love Charles Dickens, like Charles Dickens is an OG, beautiful writer. But his subplots within subplots I get why people find it tedious. And sometimes it's almost like you think that Dickens likes to hear the sound of his own pen. Don't get me wrong, I really like my boy Chuck, but you know what I mean. Dickens, when somebody says something is Dickensian, you know exactly what it means. This is not like that at all. It is, I'm eating hair, sorry. It is a very fun classic. It's not dense. It's not heavy. It's not depressing. It's actually quite fun. And the dialogue, especially between John Ridd and Lorna, their romantic dialogue is a little cheesy, but in a way that's just chef's kiss, you know what I mean? And there's also something about this novel, both Joanne and I agreed on this, that there's something about it that feels almost fairy tale-esque and whimsical. And I think it's this chivalry of John Ridd and the landscape and the scenery that's being described that made me think a little bit of maybe Robin Hood or something like that. I can see why there were some reviews of this book that I've seen online, written reviews, where I can see why some young people, and they're being 12, 13 years old, who were into stories of chivalry and knights. There aren't no knights. There were not really any knights in this book, but you know, that almost that medieval type of chivalry, why they gravitated towards this book, and it was a favorite. And this book, again, feels whimsical, almost like a myth. It is gorgeously written. So, yes, I think that if you have this book on your TBR, I say give it a go, because it is not what Joanne and I expected, and we both liked it way more than we thought we would. We both gave it a 4.25 out of 5, which is high. And John Ridd is such a lovable narrator. He's so goofy, but you know he means well despite all his flaws as well, in the way that he feels about poor little Eliza. And like I said at the beginning, the female characters, even though this is written in John Ridd's perspective, the Blackmore made the female characters really the strongest ones, and it's so good. So have you read Lorna Doone? Is it on your TBR? Please feel free to let me know how you felt about it in the comments down below. Also, please feel free to like and subscribe. Also, please feel free to follow me on Instagram, where I get up to more bookish shenanigans. I post all of my book reviews there first, along with my monthly TBRs and reading wrap-ups and goofy memes in the Instagram stories that have nothing to do with books. Little ballet stuff here, funny animal videos there, etc. Also, yeah, I think that's it. Also, I don't know why I said also. Oh, I know why I said also. My link to my Instagram, I did a split screen so you can see the handle, but also I have a link in the description box below. So with that, I'm going to sign off. It is 1 o'clock. So it is time for lunch. Then I gotta run an errand and all that stuff that you do on Saturdays so that your Sundays are actually chill. And with that, I will sign off and see you guys in the next one.